Cannibalism has long fascinated and horrified humanity. The idea of eating human flesh taps into our deepest fears and curiosities. It's why you clicked on this video, and why it's been a popular topic of myths, legends, and tales of exploration. During the age of exploration, unsurprisingly, this fascination found its way onto maps, as European cartographers depicted cannibals to illustrate the mysterious and exotic lands that explorers were encountering. But how accurate are these depictions? Were Europeans genuinely encountering cannibals? Or were these stories invented to justify colonization? Or were they simply sensational tales reflecting European fears and misconceptions? This video will try to answer these questions, while also looking at a lot of old maps. But quickly, thank you to raremaps.com for sponsoring this video. They allowed me to use high-definition images of literally every map you'll see in this video, but more about them at the end. The first reports of cannibalism in the Americas came from Christopher Columbus. On his second voyage, Columbus wrote in his diary, "I showed the Indians gold and pearls, and some of the old ones told me that in a place called Bohiho, there are endless quantities of gold, and the people wear it around their necks and arms and legs and in their ears, and pearls too. I also understood them to say there are large ships and a trade in goods all to the southeast, and that a long way away there are men with one eye, and others with noses like dogs who eat human flesh. When they capture someone, they cut his throat and drink his blood and cut off his private parts." Columbus was referring to stories from the Taino people about the Caribs, but the accuracy of Columbus's accounts remains unclear. Many believe that Columbus misunderstood, or worse, exaggerated, or even fabricated these reports to justify colonization and subjugation of the local populations. This includes the location of the Caribs. Even if the stories of cannibalism by the Caribs were true, it has long been believed that the Caribs never ventured as far north as Columbus claimed, invading and pillaging Arawak territory. However, in 2020, researchers using facial recognition technology to analyze bones suggested that Columbus may have been correct, meaning that the Caribs were present further north than the island of Guadeloupe and the Lower Antilles, increasing the likelihood of conflict and even the possibility of cannibalizing the Arawaks. The Florida Museum of Natural History curator of Caribbean archaeology had spent years trying to disprove Columbus's claim, but changed positions after this new information and stated, "Maybe there was some cannibalism involved. If you need to frighten your enemies, that's a good way to do it." Whether or not they were accurate, Columbus's accounts were widely published across Europe, and European perception that Caribs were cannibals had a tremendous impact on the region's history. Every person in the entire Caribbean became a Carib in the eyes of the colonists. The Spanish monarchy initially insisted that indigenous people be paid for their labor and treated with respect, rather than enslaved. However, this stance changed after receiving reports that the indigenous people refused to convert to Christianity and practice cannibalism. Not long after Columbus's accounts, the Italian explorer for whom the Americas are named, Amerigo Vespucci, described in letters the cannibalistic practices by indigenous tribes in Brazil. Those who they bring home captives from war they preserve, not to spare their lives, but that they may be slain for food, for they eat one another, the victors the vanquished, and among other kinds of meat, human flesh is a common article of diet with them. Nay, be the more assured of this fact, because the father has already been seen to eat children and wife. And I knew a man who I also spoke to, who was reputed to have eaten more than 300 human bodies. And I likewise remained 27 days in a certain city where I saw salted human flesh suspended from beams between the houses, just as with us it is custom to hang bacon and pork. I say further, they themselves wonder why we do not eat our enemies, and do not use as foods their flesh, which they say is most savory. There has been considerable debate over the authenticity of these letters, with some scholars suggesting that they may have been embellished or even fabricated. Despite this, the letters like Columbus's influenced European perceptions of the New World. Nearly a century later, Sir Walter Raleigh's reports of cannibalism, based on stories from natives during his El Dorado expedition, reinforced the earlier views expressed by Amerigo Vespucci. To the west are diverse nations of cannibals, and those Iwaipanoma without heads. These accounts influenced Shakespeare's Othello, showing how far rumors of cannibalism in the Americas had spread across Europe. Raleigh does not appear to have witnessed cannibalism firsthand in his writings, with one notable exception. Interestingly, He doesn't refer to this practice as belonging to one of the so-called cannibalistic tribes. Instead, he described how the Arawaks would grind the bones of their deceased leaders into powder, which their wives and friends would then drink mixed into their beverages. The practice was likely a way of honoring their leaders, symbolically making them part of the living. Raleigh also noted that the Spanish had convinced the Arawaks that the English were cannibals, just like those of their neighboring enemies, turning the narrative against their colonial rivals. It's difficult to determine the accuracy of Raleigh's information. While the stories of cannibalism could be true, the inclusion of headless men cast doubt on their credibility, and like other Europeans, he had a strong incentive to present these depictions in a way that would gain support and generate interest in colonization. By emphasizing the so-called cannibals, he could justify calls to civilize the indigenous peoples and keep himself at the forefront of these efforts. However, it's also possible that Raleigh believed some of the stories he heard from the indigenous people or other explorers, even if they were not entirely accurate. He may not have been deliberately fabricating these accounts, but rather reporting them as he understood them. Hernán Cortés, the Spanish conquistador, witnessed cannibalism in his encounters with the Aztec Empire. One notable incident occurred in 1520 in the town of Xoltepec, Tecoaque, where Aztec forces captured and cannibalized a convoy of dozens of Spaniards and hundreds of allied indigenous people that included women and children. Tecoaque means the place where they ate them in the Aztec language of Nahuatl. The Aztec allies sacrificed the captives to their gods over an 8-month period. Archaeologists have found that the town's population grew to about 5,000 as people from the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan arrived to participate in the ceremonies. The act led to a brutal retaliation by Cortez's forces, who massacred many Aztec women and children as retribution. While true, Cortez's descriptions were used to justify the Spanish conquest and the harsh treatment of the indigenous population. The Aztecs viewed these sacrifices as essential to maintaining cosmic order and appeasing their gods, but this was completely alien and horrifying to outsiders. Cortez's interactions with the Aztecs culminated in the fall of Tenochtitlan in 1521, leading to the collapse of the Aztec Empire and the establishment of Spanish rule over Mexico. At least one prominent explorer was allegedly killed and eaten by natives. Giovanni da Verrazzano undertook several voyages to the Americas on behalf of the French. During his third voyage in 1528, he explored areas around the Caribbean. According to his brother, who was with him on the voyage, Verrazzano anchored his ship off an island, probably Guadalupe, and went ashore with some of his crew. They believed the island to be uninhabited. Verrazzano was ambushed by the native Carib people and eaten. The other ships in the fleet, anchored out of gunshot range, watched in horror, unable to intervene. Like the others, while this story could be true, there are many that believe the story was fabricated, and that it was more likely that he was captured and killed by pirates, or the Spanish. Da Verrazzano was a celebrated explorer, and admitting that he had been killed by pirates or captured by the Spanish might have been embarrassing for his family and patrons, especially in the highly competitive world of European exploration. By claiming that Giovanni was killed in a violent and dramatic manner by cannibals, his brother may have been preserving Giovanni's reputation, framing his death as a tragic loss to the world of exploration, rather than as a failure or humiliation. And ultimately, it's just a cooler story, and with other European explorers already reporting cannibalism, it was easy to demonize the natives and reinforce this narrative. Cartographers at the time took the stories from explorers, often at face value, and integrated them into their maps. While it's possible that some explorers used these accounts for propaganda, it's unlikely that most cartographers themselves were actively engaging in this, especially since many of them came from nations that were not directly involved in colonizing the Americas. During this period, it was common for cartographers to fill unexplored areas of these pieces of art with imaginative illustrations. Just as they depicted sea monsters in the oceans, they populated the land with fascinating creatures and people to capture viewers' curiosity. Much like my motivation for creating this video, these depictions were designed to intrigue and engage the audience, sparking their fascination with the unknown. Thank you to RareMaps.com for supporting this video. RareMaps.com is an online antique map shop with over 10,000 antique maps in their inventory. Every map you saw in this video is for sale on their website right now. but their descriptions and high-definition images are what makes many of these old map videos possible. So they are also a great place to browse and just learn more about old maps. Again, that's raremaps.com. And that's all for this video. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you all for watching.